Kelly Overstreet Johnson was working for Chris Wheeler's brother, James Wheeler, while she was handling all of my information.
So she had a conflict of interest that was undisclosed.
No, that's not a conflict, is it? Les, here in Florida, where there is no conflict.
No such thing as conflicts of interest, right?
Right,
absolutely. Not for these people, but it is for anybody else.
In a lawless legal system, there is, that's the key, the glue that binds this whole thing is conflict. If all of these people had to adhere to conflict laws, this would never happen. But the fact that they can pick up the phone and it's a good old boy network, there's the conflict.
Right,
So James Wheeler, who's at another law firm, Broad and Cassell, he's got the girl at the top covering up the Wheeler complaint. I mean, Chris Wheeler gets in a drunk driving, and the Florida bar, Eric Turner, goes into the press and says that the Florida bar isn't going to do anything, it was a misdemeanor. Well, factually, it wasn't a misdemeanor. It was a felony because he injured somebody and left him in the car while he was wasted, and his wife was there telling the police that he was wasted. It's all in the police report up at my website. If you click on the first picture of Chris Wheeler, you'll see.
Okay,
the police report pops up. But the point is, why is the Florida bar stepping into the news, and this is coming out in like the Palm Beach Post, and covering for Wheeler, because they would have had to start investigating him on the felony issue. Right. And they would have disbarred him on a felony.
And why is Wheeler not disbarable? What is
his now he's taken early retirement from Proskauer. And one of the key architects of the block of due process, not only in the New York disciplinary, but here in the Florida disciplinary for Proskauer, Stephen Crane, who was, he also was one of the heads of the ABA as well, and thought to be one of the leading people in ethics, just died on me before I could prosecute him. But he died at 53 after eating lunch, and he was a very heavy-set, greed, gluttonous person. But and he's one of the key architects of destabilizing these bars. I mean, he's the guy that was put in New York and in the national, and then through Florida, they started changing laws, really changing the bar to protect attorneys, meaning the whole bar system is an attorney protection agency. The fact that I gave them evidence and the people who handled my complaint handled it illegally, meaning, in fact, the people who represented Proskauer in the Florida bar were other Proskauer partners who were officers of the Florida bar.
They were board of governors? They were on the board of governors?
Right. And one of those things.
Okay.
But they were under, and I have it on confirmation from the bar, that they were in a blackout period, this gentleman, Matthew Triggs of Proskauer Rose, when he handled the bar complaint. He also, by the way, was conflicted from handling the bar complaint because he was also the Proskauer attorney in the Labarga court at the simultaneous time.
So the whole thing is nepotism and just everybody is
in conflicts.
In conflicts,
But Les, when you're a victim of a lawyer and you think you're going to go get restitution from the bar, when you send your information to the bar, they allow the attorney you're complaining of to not only view the information you're putting up against them, which is unlike any other investigation, but to actually handle the information. And this is how you get nowhere. And they've got a whole system, again, it seems very well architected, to diffuse complaints top down. And, these guys, Kenneth Marvin, we have one guy, I can't remember, John Anthony Boggs.
Yeah, Anthony Boggs. Yeah, I'm going to put a pin through that, okay? John Anthony Boggs, we'll talk about him when we come back. I want to take a short commercial break. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein. Eliot made a complaint against attorney Christopher Clark Wheeler to the Florida bar. The complaint was voluminous in great detail with complete evidence provided, and the Florida bar's response to all of that was no action.
No, it was cover-up.
Cover-up, not only no action, but covering up what the situation was. They now had the blueprint of what happened, and they could work backwards to cover it up. We'll be back with Eliot Bernstein. Don't go away. This is Disbar, the Florida Bar. We're with you every weekday here from 2 to 3 right on the Biz. And I want to remind you that the programs do stream live on disbarthefloridabar.com. This is a corporate entity that is a 501c4 corporate entity which can and should be supported by public funds. And we're asking you, if you would, go to the website and contribute to the support of this program. This is a very important program for not only the citizens of Florida or South Florida and Florida, but also citizens around the country who are also being affected in other places by out-of-control bar associations and attorneys who are taking advantage as rogues. Not only are there rogue attorneys, but there are rogue judges. When we come back from our short commercial break, we're going to talk to Eliot Bernstein further, attorneys involved in his case, and rogue judges, as well as those rogues who are part of the Florida bar's makeup. We'll be right back. My name is Winston, and I host Disbar, the Florida Bar, right here on The Biz in South Florida.
In Florida, all other professionals except lawyers are governed by the Department of Business and Professional Regulation.
And increasingly people are coming to this conclusion that the judicial branch of government is itself the most dangerous branch of government.
There's a system out of control. There's no more check and balance.
Only lawyers regulate themselves through the Florida Bar. This has created a very dangerous good old boys club and a lot of rotten apples.
Yeah, they tell the other branches what they can do.
The United States Trustees Program is the largest organized criminal element in the world.
They allowed somebody to put a bomb in my car and attempt to murder my 3 children.
If some real investigative writer would ever do a study on which lawyers were ever disciplined and for what, and which ones were not, I think they'd see that there are certain members of the bar that are favored over others.
Tune in each weekday from 2 o'clock to 3 p.m. and listen to stories of individuals who have been affected by the corruption of the Florida bar. We want you to be aware of the problem that we have with this disciplinary agency. Join us every weekday, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. right here on The Biz. And we're back. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein. Eliot is the inventor of technology which has been likened to digital electricity in the sense that it has allowed all of the things that we see now in the digital world, the amazing ability of seeing full video and it's a little bit beyond me, Eliot, but I know that the technology is extremely powerful and was extremely valuable, and this was stolen from you by the patent attorneys that were involved in helping you to patent this, actually, who recognized the value of this. And you did file a complaint very early on against attorneys, one in particular, Christopher Clark Wheeler. You provided the evidence to the Florida Bar. The Florida Bar not only didn't do anything about it, they helped to cover up the problem, to protect all of the relationships. And that's what happens here. It's like, you uncover a very small thread of the problem, and as you get closer and closer to the spool, you start to understand how it involves so many different facets and so many different angles of this entity, the Florida Bar, and the attorneys who are rogue attorneys and judges who help those rogue attorneys. And the reason behind it always comes down to the greed factor. There's money involved, and in this case, huge amounts of money, which you are still working to recover and will hopefully be successful. So, Eliot, we were talking before the break about John Anthony Boggs. What was his relationship to the bar at the time?
Well, he was their chief counsel or something, or he was under Marvin. I don't recall his exact title. I had complained about Matthew Triggs, who was from Proskauer. We caught him violating his public office. He was in a blackout period where he couldn't represent anyone before the bar, and instead he's representing his partners. Also, while in a civil litigation simultaneously with us, which also is a conflict under the Florida Bar rules. Mm-hmm. So I complained about Triggs, and the Florida Bar refused to formally docket the complaint as required by the Constitution of Florida. They would not intake it because it was a pure factual conflict. They would have had admonished. It would have started the onion peeling for me right there. Mm-hmm. So Boggs and Marvin were called in for the cover-up.
Mm-hmm. How did they cover it up?
Well, for example, when what we found out on Wheeler next, when we contacted the president of the Florida Bar, Johnson, Kelly Overstreet Johnson, mm-hmm. She was handling the information. And, everything was, we'll get back to you and all that. And she was handling the information without telling us that she was working for Chris Wheeler, who we originally complained of, his brother, brought in Cassell. And so we discovered that conflict. Then we went to Marvin, who called saying that Kelly Overstreet Johnson wouldn't be, or I might have been Boggs, called and the Florida bar called and said that she wouldn't be handling anything further. Thank you. But they wouldn't take my complaint against her. They wouldn't file my complaint against Triggs. And so Boggs, in fact, to cover up for Triggs, once we caught Triggs violating his public office, instead of them forcing Triggs to respond, the Florida bar actually responded for him as if they were his lawyers. John Anthony Boggs responded by citing a code of law that wasn't codified yet, meaning it was a draft that he had just drafted several nights earlier, we later learned. And
unbelievable.
Trying to say that had Triggs contacted the Florida bar, he could have gotten approval. And we call it the he coulda, shoulda, woulda, because even if that rule was real, he still had never contacted anybody, told him of his conflict and his prohibition. And so, yeah, great, he could have, he would have, he should have, but he didn't. So it's a conflict still. And so they completely stonewalled me. And that led me to call the Florida Supreme Court, where Deborah Yarborough told me to file a complaint after, we confirmed that Triggs was, definitely in conflict, and that the Florida bar wouldn't take a complaint according to the Constitution. They have to, formally take in the complaint at least and docket it.
Right.
But they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do Triggs. They wouldn't do Marvin. We complained about this guy Turner, and they wouldn't formally docket that. They turned it into an employee complaint.
Right.
And,
yeah, they have a trick and a solution to every single attempt to unravel the onion, to uncover, to get to the center.
Down.
Yeah,
it's top down. And let me tell you, when somebody's about to do the right thing, like this first person we contacted, Lorraine Christine Hoffman.
Yeah,
she might have originally been wanting to do the right thing, and it sure sounded like she was going to.
Yeah,
and then she's replaced. And then, it looks like she writes this letter, under a gun. And Eric Turner's letter looks like somebody had a shotgun to his head. Because it's illegible. It's not even written in proper English if you read it.
Okay.
It's one of the funniest letters you'll ever read, written by the bar. And that was in response to the Florida Supreme Court's request to respond to my complaint. But you're right. They've got a whole.
So let's. What I would really be interested in doing is taking those excerpts from those Florida bar letters where they use the language, all this Mickey Mouse language that they use to stop you from going any further. They make up their own rules, or they call it something that it's not. I mean, they use fee disputes. They use every single thing that you could possibly come up with.
Oh, they say you're in civil litigation, even though you're not.
Yeah, or you're a disgruntled. That's their favorite word. Oh, you're just a disgruntled guy. Who's disgruntled with his attorney's results. You're disgruntled with the outcome of the. Yeah, you're disgruntled because you were screwed by rogues. You have a right to be disgruntled.
Well, and I had very serious evidence. I had evidence that the Proskauer guys had perjured themselves to a court. Absolute evidence of perjury of Rubenstein. That I was taking to these guys. But then here is the fact. Then they hand that information to the people you're complaining about.
Right.
And now that guy's involved in the complaint process, got access to the bar files you're filing.
Right.
So, I mean, that's like...
well, they're not a prosecutorial agency. And did you ever take it to the FBI or take it to...
oh, absolutely. All of it.
And what do they do?
Well, the FBI... Definitely, they've lost my file, including the car bombing files, which led me to the Inspector General of the FBI, Glenn Fine, and he's assigned some people here in Miami and elsewhere to the case, and they explained to me that the kind of crime I was explaining of law firms that had infiltrated the government and almost a coup on various states. Now perhaps the federal government, that kind of investigation would take time.
Yeah.
They haven't they haven't
said no.
They haven't closed. Right, exactly.
And they won't tell you if it's an ongoing investigation.
They don't call you and say they're not your buddies in this.
No.
But much different than where the Florida bar is writing these letters. There wasn't anything here.
Yeah.
They're you're in a civil case, so we don't handle it, even though their own rules say that it doesn't matter if you're in a civil case. But they write you that letter, and it sends you back another 3 months.
But don't you find?
Got to go read more bar laws.
Don't you find it amazing that the FBI will always